Good afternoon, everybody. It's good that a lot of the words that we're using today are words that I've got written down here in some shape or form. Equivalence, mutual recognition, all those things are very high up on our list of topics that we're discussing at the CME. So the CME, for those that don't know, operates 5 derivatives exchanges. Is one of the world's largest derivatives clearing houses and also operates a swap depository, data deposit repository, one of those two. And obviously we trade across the global markets. We reach across 150 different countries, and so as a consequence, we have a lot of regulatory issues that we have to deal with, and we have a lot of different regulators who we have to report to. I suppose one of the big issues from our point of view is this divergence, or is the lack of certainty that there is in the markets between the different regulators. And Paul mentioned it earlier, and I thoroughly agree with what he was saying. I suppose given that dynamic, it's easy to see why we are strong supporters of greater cross-border regulatory dialogue. We believe it's imperative that jurisdictions have the authority to grant access to third country market infrastructures under the concepts of those two wonderful words, equivalence and market and mutual recognition. Mutual recognition facilitates cross-border transactions in our global marketplaces by reducing the need to harmonize multiple and sometimes conflicting regulatory regimes. And we've heard a bit of that today from the previous speakers. For clearinghouses, the IOSCO principles are an important step to setting minimum international standards that can be used as a baseline for recognition of third country clearinghouses, where those clearinghouses are subject to comprehensive supervision and regulation by a competent regulator. More work needs to be done for derivatives trade venues, and the details around this will be debated in level 1 under MIFIR. So we've talked about equivalence, and so I wanted to throw out a couple of thoughts about what does equivalence mean, and we can discuss this later in the panel. So standards imposed on third country firms and markets should not be higher than those imposed on domestic firms, and literal equivalence should not be used as a barrier to entry. Any jurisdiction's equivalence test should be based on transparent, proportionate, fair and objective grounds. It must also recognize other jurisdictions have different legal and regulatory structures, and that equivalence should be judged on an outcome determination basis. That really comes back to what Sharon was saying early on. It is very much around the outcome, and the roads to that outcome may be different, and we must recognize that and appreciate that. A line-by-line comparison of regulatory requirements, and if you put Dodd-Frank against the mirror, there are a lot of them, is really is not the way to go. So just so that, to put a few thoughts into the regulatory panel, there are 3 issues I'd like to highlight before we move on. First, the equivalence and determination under EMIR, which is a critical step for our US clearinghouse to become recognized as a third country CCP. There cannot be an overemphasis on line item issues such as a minimum margin period of risk. Every CCP is different and uses the different items in the risk management toolbox in different ways. Risk management tools such as margin levels are far more dynamic than the black and white regulations tend to suggest. They vary by CCPs, asset class, and products, but all are intended to meet the same goal. As I mentioned earlier, equivalence for CCP regimes must be outcome-based. Variance is inevitable, but it can't be a barrier. Second one, there's been a lot of debate about 2 days versus 1, 2 versus 5, and this hasn't been confined to margin for derivatives. 12 futures exchanges across Americas, EMEA, and Asia have been working with the capital standard setters in Basel to develop a framework that ensures capital for derivatives match the risk profile. This applies for exchange trade derivatives and OTC. As the market evolves, these product risk profiles will change. And that really is very important. This is a dynamic market. It will move and it will change, especially as we get the new rules and regulations in. And so we need to be able to have a flexible regulatory framework. Lastly, equivalence for trading venues must be a key focus as well. The definition of OTC derivatives under EMIR includes anything that is not traded on a regulated market or a non-EU venue that is equivalent. The Commission has not yet published a list of non-EU trading venues that are equivalent to regulated markets. This is creating confusion in the market and even suggesting that highly regulated liquid futures traded on non-Euro EU exchanges could count towards the OTC clearing thresholds under EMIR. We are hoping this is resolved sooner rather than later, but it's just another example of how the challenge of these cross-border issues must be addressed in a holistic manner. Thank you.